You're sitting in a dimly lit, overpriced restaurant, clinking champagne glasses with the woman you've been sneaking around with for the past year. You're laughing at one of her jokes, feeling entirely invincible. You think you've got it all figured out, a beautiful, carefree mistress across the table, and a loyal, heavily pregnant wife waiting blindly at home. But then, a waiter approaches, hands you a thick manila envelope on a silver tray, and walks away. Your smile freezes, because your pregnant wife isn't waiting at home. She knows everything. She's watching you right now, and she just served you divorce papers. Let me tell you the real story of Chloe and Simon, and the ultimate price of betrayal. Chloe Crawford was 32 years old, 7 months pregnant, with her first child, and deeply in love with her husband of 6 years, Simon. To the outside world, they were the quintessential modern success story. They had met in their mid-20s, built a lucrative marketing consultancy firm from the ground up, and had recently moved into a stunning 4-bedroom colonial home in the quiet suburbs of Seattle. Simon was charming, ambitious, and seemingly devoted. Chloe was the strategic backbone of their business, though she had taken a step back in recent months to prepare for the arrival of their daughter, Lily. Everything felt perfect, until it wasn't. It started with the subtleties, the kind of microscopic shifts in behavior that a wife only notices when she knows her husband's soul better than her own. Simon started coming home later, smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't Chloe's. It was a distinct, expensive scent notes of bergamot, jasmine, and something intensely smoky. When Chloe asked about it, Simon casually brushed it off, claiming he had been trapped in a crowded elevator with an over-perfumed executive at a client meeting. Chloe, exhausted from the physical toll of her 3rd trimester, let it go. Her swollen ankles and aching back demanded more attention than her fleeting paranoia. But the paranoia didn't leave. It festered. 2 weeks later, the facade cracked. It was a Tuesday night, raining heavily, and Simon was asleep. His phone, usually left on the kitchen counter downstairs, was tucked under his pillow. Chloe woke up at 2 a.m. to use the bathroom, a frequent occurrence in her 7th month of pregnancy. As she shifted, Simon's phone vibrated, sliding slightly out from under the pillow. A soft, illuminating glow cast a shadow across his face. Chloe wasn't a snooper. In 6 years, she had never once felt the urge to check his devices, but an instinct primal and warning seized her. She carefully slid the phone out. The screen displayed a notification from a number saved simply as S. Anderson, vendor. Can't stop thinking about the weekend. The suite was perfect. Sleep well, handsome. The world stopped spinning. The air in the bedroom grew thick, suffocating her. Chloe stared at the glowing screen until her vision blurred with hot, stinging tears. Her hands trembled so violently she almost dropped the device. S. Anderson, a vendor. They didn't even use vendors with that name at their firm. She needed more. Holding her breath, she used Simon's thumb while he slept heavily to unlock the screen. A desperate, terrifying violation of trust she never thought she'd commit. She opened the messages. It wasn't a vendor. It was a woman named Vanessa Sterling. As Chloe scrolled, her heart shattered into a million jagged pieces. The messages dated back 11 months. 11 months of deceit. While Chloe had been struggling with agonizing morning sickness, Simon had been booking weekend getaways to Napa Valley. While Chloe was picking out cribs and painting the nursery a soft pastel yellow, Simon was buying Vanessa a Cartier love bracelet, a $7,000 piece of jewelry he claimed was a bonus he couldn't afford to give Chloe for their anniversary because the business needed the capital. The most devastating message, however, was sent just 3 days prior. Vanessa, I hate sharing you. When is she finally going to pop so you can stop playing the doting dad routine? Simon, soon, babe. Just gotta play the part until the baby is born. Then I'll figure out the exit strategy. I can't leave a pregnant woman. The optics would ruin the firm. Just be patient. You're the only one I want. Chloe collapsed onto the cold bathroom tile, clutching her swollen stomach. A violent sob ripped through her chest, muffled only by the towel she shoved into her mouth so Simon wouldn't hear. Her husband, The father of her unborn child was planning to abandon them. He was just waiting for the right optics. She felt a sharp kick against her ribs, little Lily, oblivious to the fact that her family had just been annihilated before she even took her first breath. Chloe lay on that floor for 2 hours, letting the grief wash over her in agonizing waves. But as the sun began to peek through the bathroom blinds, the despair began to harden. The tears stopped. In their place, a cold, terrifying clarity took over. Simon thought he was the architect of their downfall. He thought he was in control. He was wrong. The hardest performance of Chloe's life began at 7 a.m. that morning. She crawled back into bed, waited for Simon's alarm to go off, and smiled when he kissed her forehead. "Morning, beautiful. How's my girl doing today?" Simon asked, rubbing her stomach with a practiced, sickening affection. "We're doing great, Simon," Chloe replied, her voice steady, though her skin crawled at his touch. "Just tired. Rest up. I've got a massive strategy session today. Might be home late again," he lied smoothly, tying his silk tie in the mirror. As soon as his Tesla pulled out of the driveway, Chloe went to work. She didn't call her mother to cry. She didn't call her friends to vent. She called Gregory Hayes, the most ruthless, high-profile family law attorney in Seattle. Gregory was a shark in a tailored suit, known for dismantling cheating spouses with surgical precision. Sitting in Gregory's sleek, glass-walled office later that afternoon, Chloe laid out the evidence. She had taken screenshots of every message, every hotel receipt forwarded to Simon's secret email address, and every photo of Vanessa she had managed to find online. Vanessa Sterling was 26, a junior art curator, and completely obsessed with the luxurious lifestyle Simon was illegally funding. "Here is the reality, Chloe," Gregory said, leaning back and steepling his fingers. "Washington is a community property state. Normally, everything is split 50-50. However, the fact that you co-own the business complicates things. What makes it interesting is the money he's been spending on the mistress. The Cartier bracelet, the trips," Chloe nodded. "Exactly. It's called dissipation of marital assets. Every single dollar he spent on Vanessa, without your knowledge, is money he stole from your joint estate. We will claw it back, but we need a complete forensic audit of the firm's accounts. Can you get access?" "I built the firm's financial infrastructure," Chloe said, a dangerous smirk playing on her lips. "I have backdoor access to ledgers he doesn't even know exist." Over the next 4 weeks, Chloe lived a dual life. By day, she was the nesting, exhausted pregnant wife. By night, she was a ghost in the machine. She downloaded years of financial records, discovering that Simon had been funneling money out of the business through a shell consulting account to pay for Vanessa's luxury apartment downtown. The depth of his financial betrayal matched the emotional one. He wasn't just cheating. He was bankrupting their daughter's future. The psychological toll on Chloe was immense. There were nights when Simon would return home, smelling of that same smoky jasmine perfume, and she wanted to scream, to throw plates, to demand answers. She wanted to ask him how he could look at her pregnant body and then go bury himself in another woman. But she held her tongue. Every time she felt weak, she looked at the growing pile of legal documents hidden in a secure lockbox at her sister's house. She was methodically untangling her life from his. She opened a separate bank account, in her name only, legally transferring her exact half of their legitimate savings to protect it from his reckless spending. She quietly signed a lease on a beautiful, secure townhome near her sister, moving small, unnoticeable boxes of her personal items and the baby's essential gear out of the house while Simon was working late. Simon, blinded by his own arrogance and infatuation with Vanessa, noticed absolutely nothing. He assumed Chloe's quietness was due to pregnancy hormones. He mistook her distance for fatigue. He thought he was playing a brilliant game of chess, completely unaware that Chloe had already flipped the board. The climax of her preparation came when she discovered his ultimate plan. Through an intercepted email, Chloe found out that Simon and Vanessa were planning a lavish anniversary dinner to celebrate 1 year of their affair. They had booked the private dining room at the street, Laurent, the most exclusive French restaurant in the city. The date of their dinner was exactly 3 days before Chloe's scheduled induction. She called Gregory. "I want the papers served on Friday night," she told her lawyer, her voice devoid of any warmth. "And I want them served at the Street Laurent, at table 7. "Consider it done," Gregory replied. Friday arrived with a crisp, biting chill in the air. Simon packed a small overnight bag, telling Chloe he had an unavoidable emergency trip to Portland for a client crisis. "I hate leaving you this close to the due date, babe," Simon said, putting on his best performance of a distressed, caring husband. He kissed her cheek. "If anything happens, call my mother to take you to the hospital. I'll drive back at 100 miles an hour if I have to. Don't worry about us, Simon." Chloe smiled, her eyes dead, staring right through him. "Have a great trip. Enjoy the food. Portland food is terrible," he chuckled, grabbing his keys. "Love you. Goodbye, Simon." She didn't say, "I love you back." He didn't notice. As soon as the door clicked shut, Chloe sprang into action. She had a team of movers on standby. Within 3 hours, the house was systematically stripped. But she didn't just take her things. On Gregory's legal advice, since she had proof he was using the house to entertain Vanessa, when Chloe visited her parents, she took every single piece of furniture they had purchased with her own money. The custom Italian leather sofa? Gone. The dining table? Gone. The massive 8.5-inch TV? Gone. She left him his clothes, a single folding chair, and the air mattress they used for camping. By 7 p.m., Chloe was sitting comfortably in her new, fully furnished townhome. Her sister Brenda poured her a glass of sparkling cider. Meanwhile, across town, Simon was in his element. He was dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, sitting across from Vanessa at a candlelit table at the Street Laurent. They were drinking a $400 bottle of Bordeaux. Vanessa looked stunning in a tight red silk dress, laughing loudly at a story Simon was telling about how he expertly dodged Chloe's questions that morning. "You're terrible," Vanessa giggled, reaching across the table to stroke his hand. "But I love it." "How much longer, Simon? Seriously. I'm tired of the sneaking around. I promise, baby. A few more months. Let the kid be born, let things settle, and I'll initiate the split. I'll make sure I keep the house, and you can finally move in," Simon said, raising his glass. "To us, and to our future." "To us?" Vanessa smiled. At that exact moment, a man in a sharp black suit approached the table. He didn't look like a waiter. He held a thick manila envelope resting on a silver tray. "Excuse me, Simon Crawford?" the man asked, his voice cutting through the romantic ambiance. Simon looked up, annoyed by the interruption. "Yes? If this is complimentary from the chef, just leave it." "Not exactly, sir," the man said. He picked up the envelope and dropped it squarely onto Simon's plate, right on top of his seared scallops. "You've been served." Simon stared at the envelope. The words, "Superior Court of Washington, Petition for Dissolution of Marriage," were stamped clearly on the front. The blood drained from his face, leaving him a sickly shade of gray. "Served?" Vanessa asked, her brow furrowing. "Simon, what is this?" Simon's hands shook as he tore open the envelope. The first page wasn't just a standard divorce petition. Pinned to the front was a perfectly printed, high-resolution photograph of Simon and Vanessa kissing outside her apartment, stamped with a date from 6 months ago. Beneath it was a printed copy of the text message. "Just gotta play the part until the baby is born, then I'll figure out the exit strategy." "Oh my God," Simon breathed out, the room suddenly spinning. But there was more. Attached was an emergency ex parte restraining order, preventing him from accessing their business bank accounts, alongside a notice of a forensic financial audit. Chloe hadn't just filed for divorce. She had legally frozen him out of his own life. His phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Chloe. He opened it with trembling fingers. "I figured out your exit strategy for you. I hope the scallops at the Street Laurent are better than the food in Portland. Check your bank accounts. Then check the house. Goodbye, Simon." Panic seized his chest. He immediately opened his banking app. The joint savings account, which held over $200,000, now showed a balance of exactly $100,000. His legal half, but a hold, had been placed on his remaining funds, pending the divorce settlement regarding the dissipated assets. He was locked out. "Simon, talk to me. What is going on?" Vanessa demanded, her voice rising, drawing the attention of nearby tables. Simon ignored her. Standing up so fast his chair crashed backward onto the floor, he threw a handful of $100 bills onto the table and sprinted out of the restaurant, leaving Vanessa utterly bewildered and alone. He drove recklessly back to their suburban home, his mind racing. How did she know? How long has she known? He pulled into the driveway. The house was completely dark. He fumbled with his keys, unlocked the front door, and flipped the light switch. He stepped inside and froze. The living room, once filled with expensive art, warm rugs, and plush furniture, was a desolate, echoing cavern. It was entirely empty. The only thing left in the center of the vast wooden floor was a single, cheap plastic folding chair. Resting on the chair was a printed copy of the Cartier receipt for Vanessa's bracelet, with a handwritten note across the bottom in Chloe's elegant script. "Since you like funding her lifestyle, you can start building your own from scratch." Simon dropped to his knees in the empty, echoing house, the crushing weight of reality finally snapping his illusions in half. Simon Crawford woke up on a deflated air mattress in the middle of a massive, empty master bedroom. The harsh Saturday morning light streamed through the uncurtained windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the cold air. For a brief, disorienting second, he thought it was a nightmare. Then his aching back and the profound silence of the house brought the reality of Friday night crashing down on him. He scrambled for his phone. There were 14 missed calls from Vanessa and a single, automated email notification from his bank. Account frozen, pending legal review. Desperation clawed at his throat. He dialed Vanessa. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice dripping with ice. "Don't call me, Simon," she snapped. "Do you have any idea how humiliating last night was? You left me at a table with a $400 tab and the entire restaurant whispering about us. Vanessa, baby, listen to me." "She ambushed me," Simon pleaded, pacing the bare hardwood floor. "It's a temporary setback. I'll hire my own shark. I'll countersue. I still own half the firm. We pull in 8 figures a year. I just need a few days to sort out the accounts." "A few days?" Vanessa scoffed. "My rent is due on Tuesday, Simon. The rent you pay. Are you telling me that money is frozen? I'll figure it out. Just stand by me." She hung up. Simon threw his phone against the wall. Though he was careful not to break it, he couldn't afford a new one right now. He spent the rest of the weekend in a state of frantic denial. He convinced himself that Chloe was acting entirely on emotional, pregnancy-induced hysteria. By Monday morning, he was sure she would realize she needed him. The firm couldn't survive without its charismatic frontman, and she certainly couldn't raise a child without him. He showered at a local gym, put on his best-tailored Tom Ford suit, and drove to the glass and steel high-rise in downtown Seattle that housed their marketing consultancy. He walked into the lobby with forced swagger, ready to take control of the narrative, ready to fire whatever temporary injunction she had filed. He swiped his keycard at the private elevator. "Access denied. Please see security." Frowning, Simon marched over to the front desk. "My card is malfunctioning, Greg. Can you buzz me up?" The young security guard looked wildly uncomfortable, his eyes darting to a clipboard. "Mr. Crawford, I've been instructed not to let you up. Actually, I've been instructed to escort you from the premises if you try to enter." "What? I own the damn company," Simon roared, drawing stares from the morning commuters. "You own 49% of the operating entity, Simon." A calm, chillingly familiar voice echoed across the marble lobby. Simon spun around. Stepping out of the executive elevator was Chloe. She wasn't wearing maternity sweatpants or looking exhausted. She was dressed in a sharp, tailored black maternity blazer, her posture perfect, her expression entirely unreadable. But it wasn't just Chloe who made the blood freeze in Simon's veins. Flanking her were 3 men in dark suits. Two were clearly corporate litigators. The third was an older, distinguished man with silver hair and eyes as cold as a frozen lake. Arthur Harrington, Chloe's father. Simon had only met Arthur a handful of times. Chloe had always pitched her family as comfortable but estranged, claiming her father was a retired, quiet man who lived out of state. Simon, consumed by his own ambition, had never bothered to look deeper. He always felt superior to Arthur, viewing him as a relic. "Arthur, what are you doing here?" Simon stammered, the remaining bravado draining from his face. "Protecting my daughter's investments," Arthur said smoothly, his voice low but carrying absolute authority. "You see, Simon, when you and Chloe started this little venture, you were practically begging for seed money. You thought you landed a miracle angel investor through a blind trust. That was me. I funded this firm because my daughter asked me to let her build something on her own terms. I stayed in the shadows because she wanted you to feel like a man." Simon felt the floor tilt beneath him. That's impossible." "Is it?" Chloe stepped forward, her eyes locked onto his. "You spent 6 years thinking you were the genius of this operation. You thought you were the untouchable kingmaker, while I was just the quiet wife doing the back-end paperwork. But I built the infrastructure. I brought in the core clients. In fact, our 3 largest accounts, TechCom, Horizon Logistics, and Vanguard." Simon swallowed hard. "Those 3 accounts made up 70% of their annual revenue." "What about them?" "They are subsidiaries of Harrington Holdings," Arthur answered for her, adjusting his cuffs. "And as of 8 a.m. this morning, they have all terminated their contracts with Crawford Consulting due to a breach of the morality and stability clauses embedded in their vendor agreements. The firm is essentially bankrupt, Simon. Your shares are worthless." "You can't do this!" Simon shouted, losing his composure entirely. "This is illegal. I'll sue you both into oblivion." "Sue away, Simon," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm whisper. "But with what money? Your personal assets are frozen, pending the audit of the funds you stole to buy Vanessa's jewelry. The firm's accounts are locked in corporate restructuring. You have nothing. You are nothing." She turned on her heel and walked back toward the elevator, the wall of suits closing in behind her. "Chloe, wait, please," Simon begged, stepping forward, but 2 of Arthur's security personnel stepped smoothly into his path, their sheer size and professional stance making it clear that taking another step would be a physical mistake. Simon was left standing in the lobby, a supposed titan of industry, utterly publicly dismantled by the woman he thought was too weak to even notice his infidelity. The rapid, brutal descent of Simon Crawford took less than 72 hours. By Wednesday, he had abandoned his pride and driven to Vanessa's luxury downtown apartment. The building, which required a key fob to even enter the lobby, suddenly felt like a fortress. He managed to slip in behind a delivery driver and took the elevator up to the penthouse floor. He banged on her door. "Vanessa, it's me. Open up." The door swung open, but Vanessa wasn't smiling. She was wearing designer loungewear, paid for by him, and had her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Behind her, Simon could see several large suitcases open on the living room floor. "What are you doing here?" she asked sharply, keeping the door only halfway open. "I need a place to crash for a few days," Simon said, trying to push past her, but she held her ground. "The firm is in temporary receivership. My wife, she planned this. She had her billionaire father pull the rug out from under me. It's insane." Vanessa stared at him, her beautiful features contorting into a mask of disgust. "Billionaire father? You told me she was a nobody. You told me you were the one bringing in all the money." "I am. I mean, I will be again. I just need time to get back on my feet. I need to stay here." "No," Vanessa said, flatly. Simon blinked. Sure, he had misheard her. "What do you mean, no? I pay the rent for this place." "Actually, you don't," Vanessa sneered. "I called the leasing office this morning. Your automatic transfer bounced yesterday because your accounts are frozen. The landlord gave me a 3-day notice to pay or quit. Since you're completely broke, I'm quitting. I'm moving to Los Angeles with a friend. I can't afford this place. and I certainly can't afford to be dragged down by a bankrupt, soon-to-be divorced liar. Vanessa, I left my wife for you, he pleaded, panic rising in his chest. You didn't leave her, Simon. She threw you out, Vanessa corrected him coldly. And frankly, I was only interested in the Simon Crawford who took me to Napa and bought me Cartier. This pathetic, desperate version of you, it's embarrassing. Don't contact me again. She slammed the door in his face. The heavy thud echoed in the quiet hallway. Hard karma had finally arrived, and it didn't care about his apologies. With nowhere else to go, Simon returned to the empty suburban house. He slept on the air mattress, eating cheap takeout, his life reduced to rubble. 2 days later, at 3 a.m. on a Friday, his phone buzzed. It was a text from his mother. Chloe is in labor. She's at Seattle General. They just took her into the delivery room. A sudden spark of hope ignited in Simon's chest. This was it. This was his leverage. A baby changed everything. If he rushed to the hospital, if he played the role of the terrified, devoted father, Chloe's family couldn't possibly keep him away from his own daughter's birth. The optics of a mother denying a father access to his child were terrible in family court. He could use this to force a negotiation. He didn't bother changing out of his wrinkled clothes. He drove frantically through the deserted, rain-slicked streets, his mind spinning a web of manipulation. He would cry. He would beg for forgiveness in front of the nurses. He would make it impossible for Chloe to turn him away. He arrived at the maternity ward on the 4th floor, his heart pounding. I'm looking for Chloe Crawford. I'm her husband. I'm the father, he told the startled nurse at the front desk, his voice loud and breathless. Room 412, sir, but Simon didn't wait for her to finish. He sprinted down the corridor, zeroing in on the heavy wooden door of 412. He reached for the handle, ready to burst in and drop to his knees. A hand clamped down on his shoulder. It felt less like a human hand and more like an industrial steel vise. Simon was violently yanked backward, spinning around to face a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. He was 6'4", dressed in a tactical black suit, with cold, assessing eyes and a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. This wasn't a standard hospital security guard. This was Garrison, a former Navy SEAL who had spent the last decade running Arthur Harrington's elite private security detail. That's far enough, mister. Crawford, Garrison said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that promised immediate violence if ignored. Take your hands off me, Simon yelled, trying to shove past the massive man. My wife is in there. My child is in there. Garrison didn't even flinch. He easily absorbed Simon's shove, shifting his weight and pinning Simon firmly against the hospital wall with a single forearm pressed against his chest. Your soon-to-be ex-wife is in there, and she has explicitly requested that you not be permitted within 100 feet of her room, Garrison stated, his tone completely devoid of emotion. You are not on the approved visitor list. You are a source of severe emotional distress to the patient. I have rights, Simon spat, struggling fruitlessly against the wall. I'm the father. Your lawyer can argue your rights in court next month, Garrison replied, leaning in slightly, his eyes narrowing. But tonight, in this hallway, my only concern is Miss Harrington's safety. Now, you can walk out of these doors, under your own power, or I can break your arm and drag you out. The choice is entirely yours, but I highly recommend the first option. Simon looked past the giant, staring at the closed door of room 412. Inside, he could hear the faint, muffled sound of a baby taking its very first breath, followed by a sharp, beautiful cry. His daughter was born, and he was on the outside, physically barred from the room, having traded his family, his fortune, and his future for a woman who didn't even want him anymore. He stopped struggling, sliding down the wall as the crushing, suffocating reality of his total defeat finally broke him. The inside of the King County Superior Court was a stark, unyielding place. The heavy oak paneling and the echoing marble floors offered no comfort to a man whose life was actively disintegrating. 8 months had passed since the night at the hospital, and Simon Crawford was unrecognizable. Gone were the tailored Tom Ford suits and the arrogant swagger. He sat at the respondent's table, wearing a cheap, off-the-rack gray suit that hung loosely on his suddenly gaunt frame. Across the aisle sat Chloe. She was radiant, dressed in a pristine white blazer, her hair falling in perfect waves. She looked every bit the billionaire heiress she had kept hidden for 6 years. Sitting next to her was Gregory Hayes, looking like a predator, about to enjoy a very slow meal. Behind them, seated in the gallery like a silent sentinel, was Garrison, his presence a constant reminder of the impenetrable wall Chloe had built around herself and her daughter, Lily. Judge Victoria Caldwell, a no-nonsense magistrate with a reputation for mercilessly punishing financial deceit in divorce proceedings, adjusted her glasses and looked down at the mountain of forensic accounting files on her desk. "Mr. Crawford," Judge Caldwell began, her voice echoing like a tolling bell, "I have reviewed the findings of the independent financial audit. The level of deception here is staggering. Not only did you dissipate marital assets to the tune of $142,000 to fund a paramour, but you actively embezzled funds from Crawford Consulting by routing them through a fictitious shell corporation, a corporation, I might add, that you registered under a false vendor name." Simon swallowed hard, his hands trembling on the table. His lawyer, a discount attorney he had hired after scraping together a meager loan from a distant cousin, stared at his notepad, knowing the case was entirely radioactive. "Your Honor, my client was under immense pressure," his lawyer started weakly. "Save it, counselor," Judge Caldwell snapped. "The only pressure your client was under was the pressure to maintain a double life. Miss, Harrington's legal team has graciously decided not to press criminal fraud charges regarding the business accounts, provided we settle the civil and familial matters today, and settle them we will." The gavel came down, and with it, the final remnants of Simon's empire were shattered. Because Simon had used the joint marital home as collateral to secure unauthorized personal loans to keep up his facade after Chloe froze his accounts, the house was seized and liquidated. The remaining equity went entirely to Chloe to repay the dissipated assets. His 49% share in the marketing firm was seized by Harrington Holdings as restitution for the corporate embezzlement. When the dust settled, Simon wasn't just broke, he was drowning in debt. The court ordered him to pay a staggering amount of child support based on his earning potential, not his current unemployed status. He was granted supervised visitation with Lily for 2 hours every other weekend visits he could barely afford to travel to. "You have 30 days to vacate your current temporary residence and begin your payment schedule, Mr. Crawford," Judge Caldwell concluded, her gaze full of disdain. "Court is adjourned." As the courtroom cleared, Simon remained rooted to his chair. He watched Chloe stand up, shake Gregory's hand, and turn toward the doors. Desperation, raw and unfiltered, clawed its way out of his throat. "Chloe," he croaked, stepping into the aisle. Garrison was there in a flash, a solid wall of muscle blocking Simon's path, but Chloe held up a single, manicured hand. The former Navy SEAL stepped back just a fraction, keeping his eyes locked on Simon's chest. "What is it, Simon?" Chloe asked, her voice as cool and detached, as if she were speaking to a stranger, asking for directions. "How did you do it?" he whispered, his eyes red and hollow. "How did you lie to me for 6 years? About the money, about your father, about who you really are." Chloe looked at him, a small, pitying smile playing on her lips. "I never lied to you, Simon. I told you my father was a comfortable investor. You were just too arrogant to look past your own reflection to ask questions. I wanted a partner, not a gold digger. I wanted to build something from the ground up, to see if the man I loved had the character to handle success. It turns out you only had the character to handle deceit." She adjusted the strap of her bag. "You thought I was just a quiet, naive girl waiting at home. You underestimated me because it made you feel powerful. But true power doesn't need to shout, Simon. True power is knowing exactly when to let someone destroy themselves." She turned and walked out of the courtroom, leaving Simon alone in the stifling silence, choking on the ashes of the life he had burned down. 2 years can feel like a fleeting moment when you are at the pinnacle of the world, but when you are trapped at the very bottom, every single day is an agonizing eternity. For Simon Crawford, the 24 months following the finalization of his divorce had been a masterclass in slow, suffocating destruction. His spectacular fall from grace had been absolute. The business community in Seattle is a tightly knit ecosystem, and the sheer scale of his deceit, embezzling from his own company to fund an affair, only to be dismantled by Arthur Harrington, had rendered him completely radioactive. No reputable marketing firm would even look at his resume. Headhunters who used to buy him $100 scotch at downtown steakhouses now screened his calls. His bank accounts remained perpetually drained by the aggressive garnishments required to pay back the remaining dissipated marital assets, on top of a crushing child support mandate. Simon was forced to abandon the glossy high-rises and move into a grim 400-square-foot basement apartment on Delridge Way. The ceiling leaked when it rained, a persistent patch of black mold crept up the bathroom wall, and the heater rattled violently before dying completely every other week. He had sold off the last remnants of his former life, his watches, his designer shoes, and finally, his prized Tesla, just to keep himself out of a King County jail cell for missing court-ordered payments. With his corporate career annihilated, Simon took the only job that offered immediate cash tips and didn't run a thorough background check. He became a valet parking attendant. It was a bitter, ironic twist of fate. The man who once sat in exclusive VIP lounges was now forced to sprint through the rain to fetch the luxury vehicles of the very people he used to consider his peers. He worked the night shift at the Rive Gauche, an ultra-exclusive, private country club nestled on the wealthy shores of Lake Washington. Every night, he swallowed his remaining pride, zipped up his cheap, poorly insulated polyester uniform jacket, and forced a subservient smile. The Pacific Northwest is infamous for its brutal winter weather, but the meteorological phenomenon that struck the Washington coast that late December was historic. Meteorologists on King 5 News had been warning the city for days about an incoming cyclone bomb, a massive, rapidly intensifying storm system carrying atmospheric river moisture and hurricane-force winds. When it hit, it brought the city to its knees. The barometric pressure plummeted. Gale-force winds, exceeding 80 miles per hour, ripped through the Seattle suburbs, snapping massive Douglas fir trees in half like dry toothpicks. Power lines were shredded, transformers exploded in showers of blue sparks, and within 3 hours, over 400,000 homes were plunged into a freezing, chaotic darkness. The temperature dropped to a bone-chilling 28 degrees, turning the torrential rain into sheets of driving, sideways sleet. Simon was working the front drive of the Rive Gauche when the brunt of the storm made landfall. The country club, boasting heavy-duty commercial backup generators, remained a glowing beacon of warmth and luxury, entirely insulated from the suffering outside. But Simon was not inside. He was standing under the meager, flapping canvas awning of the valet stand, shivering so violently his teeth audibly clicked together. His boots had soaked through hours ago, and his hands were completely numb, the skin raw and chapped from handling freezing metal door handles. The wind howled around him, a deafening roar that seemed to mock his misery. He had just been berated by a tech executive for adjusting the driver's seat of a Porsche 911, an interaction that left Simon swallowing the bile of humiliation. He leaned against the concrete pillar of the awning, closing his eyes, wondering how his life had devolved into this freezing hell. Just 3 years ago, he had been the one tossing the keys to a valet, a beautiful, pregnant wife waiting for him at home. The memory felt like it belonged to a completely different human being. Through the blinding sheet of freezing rain, the heavy, aggressive headlights of a vehicle pierced the darkness. A sleek, black, custom-armored Cadillac Escalade rolled smoothly onto the cobblestone drive of the club, its massive tires completely unfazed by the flooded driveway. Simon forced himself to move. His joints ached with the cold as he trudged forward, his boots sloshing in the icy puddles. He knew the protocol. Head down, posture subservient, open the door quickly to shield the VIP from the elements. He reached the rear passenger side, just as the driver's door opened. A massive man stepped out into the storm. He didn't flinch at the icy rain, lashing his face. He simply unfurled a heavy, golf-sized umbrella. It was Garrison. The former Navy SEAL was dressed in a sharp, dark suit, his eyes continuously scanning the perimeter with lethal efficiency. Simon's breath hitched, a sudden, icy knot forming in his stomach. He knew that face. He remembered the unyielding grip of Garrison's hand, pinning him against the hospital wall the night Lily was born. Panic, hot and suffocating, flooded Simon's system, warring with the freezing temperature of the air. If Garrison was driving, that meant Simon's trembling hand pulled the heavy handle of the Escalade's rear door. The interior cabin light flickered on, revealing an environment of absolute quiet luxury, and there she was. Chloe Crawford, now legally Chloe Harrington, again stepped out into the storm. But the storm didn't seem to touch her. Garrison expertly angled the massive umbrella, creating a perfect shield against the wind and sleet. Simon was paralyzed. The woman standing before him was breathtaking, but she was entirely unrecognizable from the exhausted, quiet wife he had betrayed. Chloe radiated an aura of absolute, terrifying authority. She was draped in a breathtaking, floor-length camel hair coat over a stunning emerald green evening gown. Diamonds glittered at her throat, catching the ambient light of the country club's portico. She was arriving for the club's annual charity gala, stepping into her new role as the CEO of the Harrington Philanthropic Trust, a position of immense regional power. As Garrison held the door, Chloe paused. She looked up, her gaze landing directly on the valet holding the car door. Simon felt as though the ground had vanished beneath his feet. Shame, raw, visceral, and agonizing, tore through his chest. He wanted to look away, to hide his face in the collar of his soaking wet, pathetic uniform. But he was frozen. He stood there, dripping with freezing mud, a bankrupt ghost of a man, staring at the titan he had foolishly tried to break. He expected her to gloat. He braced himself for a sneer, a laugh, or a cruel remark. He almost wanted her to say something, anything, to acknowledge that he was still a human being, that he still mattered enough to warrant her anger. But Chloe did the one thing that hurt far more than any insult ever could. She looked at him with an expression of profound, absolute indifference. There was no anger in her eyes. There was no triumph. There was simply nothing. He was a piece of the scenery, a minor inconvenience in the weather. He was a valet, nothing more. She held his gaze for a mere fraction of a second, her face a mask of elegant neutrality, before turning her head and walking gracefully into the warm, glowing lobby of the country club, leaving Simon shivering in the freezing rain, completely and utterly discarded. While Simon spent the rest of the night freezing on the asphalt, praying his $60 in tips would be enough to buy groceries, Chloe eventually returned to a world he could only dream of. 30 miles away, situated on the rugged, wind-swept cliffs overlooking the dark, churning waters of Puget Sound near Discovery Park, sat Chloe's new sanctuary. Following the divorce, she had refused to live in any conventional suburban neighborhood. She wanted a home that reflected the new reality. She had forged something unbreakable. She had commissioned a team of elite architectural engineers to design a custom, off-grid fortress. From the outside, it was a masterpiece of modern, organic architecture. The exterior was clad in a specialized Corten weathering steel and thick, board-formed concrete, designed specifically to withstand the corrosive salt air and the brutal winds of the coast. But the true genius of the house was entirely structural. Knowing the volatility of the Pacific Northwest weather, Chloe had instructed the builders to use insulated concrete forms, ICF, for the core walls, creating a thermal mass that made the house virtually impenetrable to the cold. The foundation was anchored deep into the basalt bedrock with industrial steel pylons. Every window in the home, stretching from the floor to the vaulted ceilings, was constructed from triple-paned, impact-resistant smart glass, the same material used in high-end aviation. As the cyclone bomb raged that night, devastating the surrounding counties, Chloe's home did not even shudder. The 80-mile-per-hour winds slammed violently against the reinforced exterior, but inside, the silence was absolute. While the rest of the King County power grid collapsed in a cascade of failures, Chloe's home remained brilliantly illuminated. Her property was powered by a massive, subterranean Tesla Powerwall battery array, fed by a reinforced solar roof and backed up by an independent geothermal heating loop that drew warmth directly from the earth. Long after the gala had ended, Chloe walked into her massive living room. She slipped out of her high heels, her bare feet sinking into the thick, heated plush rug. A fire crackled merrily in the massive stone hearth, casting a warm, golden glow across the room. Sitting in the center of the rug, completely oblivious to the apocalyptic storm raging outside the impenetrable glass, was 2-year-old Lily. She was happily babbling to herself, carefully stacking a set of wooden architectural blocks into a high tower. Chloe walked over, her heavy cashmere coat discarded, and sat cross-legged on the floor next to her daughter. Lily giggled, reaching out with a chubby hand to offer her mother a blue wooden block. Chloe smiled, taking it and placing it gently on top of the tower, fortifying the structure. She looked toward the massive windows. Beyond the glass, she could see the violent silhouette of the coastal trees whipping furiously in the gale. She knew the city was currently suffering. She knew that out there, in the freezing, unforgiving dark, the man who had tried to destroy her was learning the ultimate lesson in hard karma. Simon had thought he was the architect of their lives. He had thought he could quietly dismantle their marriage, steal their resources, and leave her out in the cold while he built a new life with his mistress. He had underestimated her intelligence, her resources, and most importantly, her resilience. Chloe took a deep breath, the warm, cedar-scented air of her home filling her lungs. A profound sense of peace settled deep into her bones. She had been dragged through the absolute worst of human betrayal, but she had not broken. Instead, she had utilized every ounce of her strength to build a foundation that could never be shaken again. As she watched Lily successfully balance another block, clapping her hands in innocent delight, Chloe knew the absolute truth of her journey. The greatest revenge against a toxic, deceitful person isn't to destroy them. They will inevitably do that to themselves. The greatest revenge is to methodically, quietly build a beautiful, unbreakable life, a life so insulated and secure that the people who betrayed you will never, ever get to touch it again. What an absolute masterclass in hard karma. Simon genuinely believed he held all the power, completely underestimating the brilliant, loyal woman standing right beside him. He traded a phenomenal partner and a beautiful family for a shallow, fleeting romance, and in the end, he lost absolutely everything. Chloe didn't just level the playing field. She built an unbreakable fortress for herself and her daughter, proving once and for all that the ultimate revenge isn't found in destroying the person who hurt you. It's found in building a spectacular, untouchable life while they are left standing out in the freezing rain. If Chloe's brilliant, silent takedown of Simon left you cheering, smash that like button right now. Share this video with anyone who needs a powerful reminder that betrayal always comes with a remarkably heavy price. What was your absolute favorite twist in Chloe's revenge? Did Simon's brutal ending as a freezing, bankrupt valet satisfy your need for justice, or did he deserve worse? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more incredible, real-life stories of shocking drama and ultimate payback.